We all have our regrets. No one goes through life without accumulating at least a couple memories of things we would have done differently. It's just part of the human experience. Celebrities are no different. Although we don't always hear about all their mistakes and failings, stars are just as prone to human error as any of us. And if you were under the constant scrutiny and surveillance of the media and paparazzi, you'd probably want to keep some things private if at all possible. Jane Fonda, a polarizing figure. Depending on who you ask, some would say Jane Fonda is one of the greatest actresses of all time, while others might tell you she's a traitor to the U.S. One thing is for sure, despite having all the odds stacked against her, Fonda still managed to become one of the most enduring figures in Hollywood history. Her story is one of mystery, secrecy, and twists that you'd only expect to find in the most gripping of mystery novels. The Barbarella actress, environmentalist, and former fashion model has experienced her fair share of controversies, but now that she's 83, she's begun to open up a bit about her past, and she has a lot to say. You might have heard conflicting things about Fonda. Hollywood, and especially the political world, are extremely divided about her. So we wanted to know, who is the real Jane Fonda? Stick around to find out what we were able to uncover. Her mother committed suicide. In 1950, when she was just 12, Jane's mother, Frances Seymour, who had been suffering from bipolar disorder for years, committed suicide on her 42nd birthday. She'd been institutionalized for quite some time, and the last time she came home to visit, a nurse accompanied her to prevent her from attempting this very thing. On that tragic day, however, Frances managed to slip away from the nurse and got a razor blade out of a lacquer box. She hid it in her belongings and brought it back to the institution with her. Ultimately, she used it to slit her own throat. Fonda didn't discover the truth about her mother's death until a year later, when a fellow student showed her a magazine article that said she'd cut her own throat. She had previously been told her mother died of a heart attack. Fonda spent years resenting her mother for committing suicide. She also harbored a lot of guilt for not being able to stop her. She was only able to come to peace with the tragedy years later when she uncovered files from her mom's medical records that indicated she was the victim of serious sexual abuse. Finally, Jane understood the pain and trauma her mother had to deal with. She had a rocky relationship with her father. Jane's father is esteemed Hollywood actor Henry Fonda. Even though he was her biological father, Jane had a difficult relationship with him up until his death in August of 1982. In numerous interviews, Jane detailed her father's cold and distant personality. In 2016, she revealed her dad only made her decades-long battle with bulimia worse than it was. She told Us Weekly that when she hit adolescence, all that mattered to him was how she looked and how fit she was. Henry used to have Jane's stepmother tell her she needed to lose weight and wear longer skirts if she ever wanted to have a boyfriend. Through her stepmoms, he would dictate all the physical changes he wanted her to make. To him, she was a lump of clay he could mold, and Jane resented him for it. Jane spent years trying to connect with her father. In 1981, they both worked on Golden Pond, the only film they ever shot together. It was made when Henry was sick, and the film's plot is said to closely mirror their real-life relationship. Even today, she still considers that film to be one of the finer moments of her career. Hey, if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you give it a like, and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. And stick around, we're going to go over why Fonda was once considered a traitor to her country. She made her peace with Barbarella. One of Jane's most famous films and one of her first big breaks was in the 1968 sci-fi cult classic Barbarella. It was shot and directed by her first husband, Roger Vadim. Making the film was particularly rough on Fonda, but as the years have gone by, Jane has developed a more favorable way of looking at it. Jane and Roger's marriage was already falling apart during production, and she had to do a lot during the filming she wasn't exactly thrilled about. For one thing, she had to be shut into a birdcage while the birds constantly defecated and plucked at her. You can't blame anyone for not being into that. Even though the film was almost universally panned when it came out, it has since developed a cult following of sorts. Even Fonda can look back on it today and enjoy it for what it was. Sure, the script is all over the place and ridiculous, but it's campy, sexy, and fun. She tried to get fired from Klute. In a few years, Jane Fonda was able to transform her reputation from being a sexy actress from Barbarella to a legitimate one. Her image especially improved after starring in They Shoot Horses, Don't They? In 1969 and Klute in 1971. The latter earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. Even though Klute helped bring her major success, the prep work she did to get into character as a New York City prostitute made her second-guess whether she was the right person for the role. The production manager of the film had managed to get her in touch with actual prostitutes and madams before filming so she could research the part and step into character. When she was in New York, she would go to after-hours clubs that the other sex workers would go to. But no pimp ever tried to pick her up. What that told her was that she wasn't right for the part. She didn't have what it took, in her eyes, to really embody the character. She begged director Alan Paula to fire her. She even gave him a list of other actresses she thought would be right for it. But he wasn't having it. She ended up sticking with the role, and the rest is history. She blames her mugshot on Richard Nixon. Jane wasn't just an actress. In the 1970s, she became famous for her political activism, especially her opposition to the Vietnam War. She wasn't afraid to ruffle feathers either. One time, she even managed to tick off President Richard Nixon, whom she later learned orchestrated her famous arrest at the Cleveland Hopkins Airport in 1970. She was returning home from Canada after delivering a powerful speech meant to raise awareness about the Winter Soldier investigation underway at the time. Once she returned to the States, her luggage was seized and her belongings searched. Authorities found a large bag full of plastic baggies marked with the letters B, L, and D. The cops were clueless about what the markings meant, but it was later determined they were shorthand for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Each baggie contained vitamins she took with each meal. Even though they were just supplements, she was arrested and charged with drug smuggling. She tried to explain what the pills were, but she was told that the cops were getting their orders directly from the White House. Nixon had hoped the scandal would ruin her credibility, and people wouldn't take her speeches seriously afterwards. Fortunately, months later, after every pill had been tested in a lab, her charges were dismissed. She regrets the Hanoi Jane scandal. In 1972, while visiting North Vietnam, Fonda was photographed smiling and laughing while sitting on top of a Vietnamese anti-aircraft gun. Jane has spent the last few decades apologizing for the incident and trying to explain herself. She was nicknamed Hanoi Jane and branded an American traitor after these photos were published. Even today, an entire section of her website is dedicated to her best and honest recollection of what happened. According to her recollection of events, she was led by someone towards the gun and told to sit down. She was still laughing and applauding in reaction to a song that was just sung for her by the local soldiers. Her laughter and smile had nothing to do with where she was sitting, but before she realized how it would look, cameras flashed. Moments later, while she was walking back to her car, she realized the gravity of the situation and how she looked. She begged and pleaded with the photographer to not publish the photographs, and he assured her it would be taken care of, but that promise proved empty. She still doesn't know if the photo was set up by the Vietnamese, but she spent the last several decades continuing to pay the price for it. She wishes she was a better mom. Fonda told Barbara Walters she believes she wasn't a particularly good parent to her daughter, Vanessa Vadim. She described their relationship as prickly and problematic. She explained to Barbara that Vanessa has been angry with her for most of her life. When she was young, she was never really there for her. She took care of all the external things like buying her food and clothes and taking her to the doctors, but she was never really there for her in an emotional sense. Even though they've since patched things up, Jane still feels a tremendous amount of guilt for not being more involved in her life when she needed it the most. Even at 83, Jane Fonda is still killing it. 2020 was a big year. Not only did she star in 10 episodes of Disney's Elena of Avalor, she was also a contestant on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, a guest on The Ellen DeGeneres Show, and a contributor for Make It Work, a special aired on the CW that focused on a group of women trying to help in the fight against COVID-19. She's also still very much involved in the film world. In 2018, she starred in Bill Holderman's romantic comedy Book Club, and in 2022, she'll be starring in the animated film Luck. Now we'd like to hear from you. What do you think Fonda's best work is? Barbarella? The China Syndrome? Klute? Julia? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to FactsVerse if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.